The penthouse was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the Sub-Zero fridge and the distant Chicago traffic. A perfect portrait of an affluent, happy marriage awaiting the wife's return. But when she finally walked through the door, collapsing with a sigh that sounded too heavy for just work fatigue, Daniel noticed the hospital band she had hastily ripped off, but failed to hide completely in her purse. It wasn't the exhaustion of a corporate merger. It was the exhaustion of a woman who had been living a double life, and the cracks were finally starting to show. If the anatomy of a lie and the quiet devastation of betrayal intrigue you, stay with me. There are truths hidden in these medical reports that are about to shatter more than just a marriage, and you won't want to look away. The rain in Chicago had a way of blurring the city lights, turning the view from the 42nd floor into a smear of gold and charcoal. Daniel stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a tumbler of untouched scotch in his hand, watching the headlights crawl along Lakeshore Drive. The apartment was quiet, the kind of expensive silence that usually brought him peace, but tonight, it felt heavy. Waiting. The front door's smart lock clicked, the mechanical sound echoing sharply in the foyer. Daniel set his glass down on the marble island and walked toward the entrance. Elena was already inside, leaning back against the heavy oak door as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. She dropped her leather weekender bag to the floor with a thud that sounded final. "Hey," Daniel said softly, stepping into her space but hesitating to touch her. She looked brittle. Elena didn't smile. Her skin, usually glowing with the polished vitality of a high-end attorney, was pale, almost translucent under the recessed halogen lights. There were dark crescents under her eyes, and her trench coat was buttoned wrong, a misalignment so unlike her that it sent a prickle of unease down Daniel's spine. "I'm dead, Daniel," she whispered, her voice rasping. "Don't ask me about the settlement. Don't ask me about the flight. I just need to sleep for 1,000 years." "I wasn't going to ask," he soothed, reaching out to take her coat. She flinched, a microscopic tensing of her shoulders, before relaxing into his help. "I know the New York summit is a meat grinder. Let me get you some water." As he peeled the wet trench coat from her shoulders, the smell hit him. It wasn't the stale, recycled air of a pressurized airplane cabin, nor the metallic scent of the L that she sometimes took when traffic was bad. It was sharp, acrid, iodine, and beneath that, the faint, cloying sweetness of institutional soap. "You smell like a hospital," he said, the words slipping out before he could filter them. Elena froze. It lasted only a second. A heartbeat skipped, but Daniel felt it. She turned away quickly, kicking off her heels. "I had to stop at a pharmacy at O'Hare. I felt nauseous. Maybe I picked it up there." "You okay? Do you need a doctor?" "No," she snapped too quickly. She softened her tone immediately, reaching out to graze his cheek with cold fingers. "No, sweetie. Just exhaustion. Pure, unadulterated burnout. I'm going to shower. Don't wait up." She walked past him toward the master suite, her movements stiff, guarded. Daniel watched her go. He saw her right hand drift subconsciously to her lower abdomen, hovering there protectively before she dropped it to her side. He picked up her bag to move it to the laundry room. It was lighter than usual. As he lifted it, a crumpled piece of paper fell from the unzipped side pocket. Daniel crouched down. It was a receipt for parking. Not from O'Hare International Airport, and not from a Manhattan garage. It was from a structure on the near north side, stamped yesterday at 3 a.m. He frowned, turning the slip over in his fingers. Why would she be parking in downtown Chicago at 3 a.m. when she was supposed to be in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan? The shower turned on in the distance, the pipes groaning behind the walls. Daniel stood there, the receipt burning a hole in his palm, the smell of iodine suddenly seeming to fill the entire apartment. He looked at his phone on the counter. It remained silent, a black mirror reflecting his own confusion. Then the screen lit up. A notification. Not a text, not an email. A LinkedIn message request from someone outside his network. Sender, Nora Vane. Subject, your wife's exhaustion. Daniel stared at the name. He didn't know a Nora Vane. But as he looked toward the bathroom door, listening to the water hit the tiles, he felt the floor beneath him shift, the structural integrity of his life compromising in real time. The morning light in the kitchen was unforgiving. It cut through the sheer curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and the hollows of Elena's cheeks as she sat at the island, nursing a cup of herbal tea. She hadn't touched her coffee, a violation of a 10-year morning ritual that felt louder than any argument. Daniel adjusted his tie, watching her. She was wearing his oversized sweatshirt, the fabric swallowing her slender frame. She looked fragile, yes, but there was a tension in her posture, a rigidness that suggested she was bracing for an impact. I might be late tonight, Daniel lied. It was a test, a small stressor applied to the beam to see if it would bend. Elena didn't look up from her tea. That's fine. I'm just going to rest. My phone is off. I don't want to hear from the firm. Rest well, he said, kissing the top of her head. She smelled faintly of that same antiseptic soap, masked now by expensive lavender lotion. The drive to his office in the Loop was a blur of gray concrete and red taillights. Daniel's mind was a loop of its own, replaying the notification from the night before. Nora Vane. By the time he had unlocked his phone to read the full message, the profile had gone dark, or perhaps he had imagined the urgency of it. But the name stuck. His office was a corner suite of glass and steel, usually a sanctuary of order. Blueprints for a new suspension bridge were spread across his drafting table, clean lines and mathematical certainties. Today, they looked like nonsense. Mail call, his assistant Jessica chirped from the doorway, dropping a neat stack of envelopes on his desk. And you have a certified letter that needed a signature. I signed for it. It's marked strictly personal. She placed a thick manila envelope on top of the pile and left, closing the glass door behind her. Daniel stared at it. The return address was blank, just a P.O. box in the suburbs. The weight of the envelope felt heavy, dense with something more than just paper. The air conditioning in the office seemed to drop 10 degrees. He reached for his letter opener, the metal cold against his palm, and sliced the top edge. Inside, there was no handwritten note, no explanation. Just a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of a hospital admission form. The header was crisp and black. Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Obstetrics and Gynecology. Daniel's breath hitched. He scanned the document, his engineer's eyes hunting for data points. Patient name, redacted with thick black marker. Patient DOB, visible. It matched Elena's. Admission date, last Friday, 1400. Discharge. Date, yesterday, 10 unqua. Attending physician, Dr. Julian Cross. His eyes dropped to the clinical notes. Status: post-operative recovery. Procedure: D&C following incomplete miscarriage. Patient advised regarding rest and Rh-negative protocol. The room spun. A miscarriage? Daniel gripped the edge of his mahogany desk, his knuckles turning white. Elena had been in New York. She had been at a legal summit. He had texted her on Friday night, and she had replied that the keynote speaker was boring. She had sent him a photo of a room service burger. He looked at the admission timestamp again. Friday, 2:00 p.m. She was checked into a hospital in Chicago 3 hours before she supposedly landed at JFK. He pulled the paper closer, looking for a mistake, a forgery. But then he saw it. In the bottom corner, under the emergency contact section, which was also redacted, there was a small handwritten note in the margin, likely from a nurse, scribbled in blue ink. Husband not to be contacted per patient request. The silence in his office was deafening. The hum of the server room, the distant wail of a siren, the scratching of his own pulse in his ears, it all amplified the betrayal. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a lie about a trip. There was a life that had been created and ended within the span of a weekend, all while he sat on their couch watching basketball, thinking his wife was chasing a promotion. He looked at the name of the attending physician again. Dr. Julian Cross. Daniel reached for his computer, his fingers trembling slightly as he typed the doctor's name into the search bar. The first result was a professional bio for a leading trauma surgeon, but it was the second result that made Daniel's blood run cold. It was a hospital gala photo from 2 years ago. Dr. Julian Cross standing next to his wife, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a tight smile. The caption read, Dr. Julian Cross and Mrs. Nora Vane Cross. Daniel looked from the screen to the paper in his hand. The LinkedIn message hadn't been a glitch. It was a warning shot. And now he was holding the ammunition. Daniel found her sitting at a high-top table in the back of a coffee shop on Rush Street, a place all white subway tiles and exposed filament bulbs. It was sterile enough to be an operating theater. He recognized her instantly from the photo on the screen, though the woman in reality was sharper, harder. Nora Vane wore a charcoal blazer and no jewelry other than a simple platinum band. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup, not for warmth, but as if she were strangling it. Daniel approached, his own reflection ghosting in the window behind her. He felt out of place in his own skin, like a man walking into his own autopsy. "Mrs. Cross?" he asked. The name tasted like ash. She looked up. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and exhausted. "It's Vane. I use my maiden name professionally. Please sit." She didn't offer a hand to shake. There was no social contract for this kind of meeting. Daniel pulled out the metal stool and sat. The noise of the espresso machine hissing in the background felt violently loud against the silence between them. "You got the envelope," she stated. It wasn't a question. "I did." Daniel placed the manila folder on the table between them. It looked innocuous, like a business contract. "You work at the hospital." "I'm the director of pathology," Nora said, her voice even, practiced. "I deal with tissue samples, biopsies, the things people cut out of themselves. I don't usually deal with patient admissions, but when my husband clears his schedule for an VIP emergency on a Friday afternoon, I tend to pay attention." Daniel swallowed, his throat dry. The report said, "incomplete miscarriage." Nora's gaze didn't waver. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second document. This one wasn't a form. It was a printout of a text log. She slid it across the table, covering the hospital logo on the folder. "Julian is a brilliant surgeon, but he is a careless man," she said. "He syncs his phone to the family cloud. He thinks I don't look. Or maybe he doesn't care." Daniel looked down. The texts were dated 3 weeks ago. "Elena, I'm late. 2 days. Julian. Don't panic. We'll handle it. Whatever you want, Elle, I'm here. Elena. I can't do this to him. Not now. But I can't keep it." Daniel felt the air leave the room. I can't do this to him. That was him. He was the him in the text message, the obstacle, the collateral damage. "She wasn't sick, Daniel," Nora continued, her voice dropping to a clinically detached whisper. "She was pregnant, and judging by the timeline on the Rh factor blood work, the conception date aligns perfectly with the weekend she told you she was at a retreat in Lake Geneva. The weekend Julian told me he was at a medical conference in Boston." Daniel closed his eyes. The memory of that weekend washed over him. He had stayed home to oversee the kitchen renovation, happy to give Elena space to relax. He had painted the walls a soft gray, thinking she would like the surprise. "Why are you telling me this?" Daniel asked, opening his eyes. "Why not just divorce him?" "Because knowledge is useless if it's isolated," Nora said. She took a sip of her coffee, her hand trembling just slightly, the only crack in her armor. "I wanted you to know that the exhaustion she's suffering from isn't work stress. It's grief. She's grieving a child she made with my husband." She leaned forward. The scent of her perfume was dry and woody, nothing like the floral mask Elena wore. "They are reckless," Nora said, "and reckless people don't stop until they crash. I'm just showing you the black box recording before the impact." Daniel looked at the text log again. "Whatever you want, Elle." The intimacy of the nickname stung worse than the medical facts. He had called her Elle when they were dating in college. "What do you want me to do?" Daniel asked. Nora stood up, smoothing her blazer. She looked down at him with a pity that cut deeper than cruelty. "I don't care what you do," she said. "But tonight they are meeting. He's checking up on his patient. If you want to see the sickness for yourself, go to the parking garage on Wacker Drive. Level 4. That's where they think they're safe." She turned and walked out into the gray afternoon, leaving Daniel alone with the lukewarm coffee and the cold, hard data of his wife's betrayal. Back in the sanctuary of his office, the silence was no longer peaceful. It was suffocating. Daniel sat with the two realities laid out before him on the drafting table. On the left, the blueprints for the Wacker Drive suspension bridge, clean, logical, structurally sound. On the right, the debris of his marriage, Nora's dossier, the medical admission form, and his own unlocked phone. He felt like a forensic investigator at a crime scene he had been living in for months. He unlocked his phone and scrolled back to last Friday. The screen brightness stung his tired eyes. Friday, 2:15 m. Elena. Just checked into the hotel. The room is tiny, but the view of the Hudson is nice. Miss you already. He looked at the medical report. Friday, 2:00 p.m. Patient admitted to pre-op. Vitals stable. IV started. She hadn't been looking at the Hudson River. She had been staring at a hospital ceiling, perhaps holding Julian's hand as the anesthesia took hold. The tiny room was a recovery bay. The lie was so seamless, so casual, that it made his stomach turn. She had typed that message while prepping to terminate a pregnancy conceived in an affair. Daniel scrolled further. Saturday, 10 o'clock a.m. Daniel, how's the summit? Hope the coffee is better than at home. Elena, lectures are endless. My head is pounding. Going to skip the gala tonight and just order room service. Love you. He looked at the pathology notes. Saturday, 09:30 a.m. Patient reports significant cramping and emotional distress. Administered pain management. The headache was physical trauma. The skipped gala was bed rest. Daniel traced the timeline with his finger, a cold numbness spreading through his chest. He had spent that Saturday worrying about her stress levels, feeling guilty that he wasn't there to rub her shoulders. He had been so proud of her dedication to her career. He was a fool. A supportive, loving, blind fool. The phone in his hand buzzed, jarring him so hard he nearly dropped it. The screen flashed. My wife. For a moment, he just stared at the contact photo, a picture of them from a vineyard trip 2 years ago, smiling, sun-drenched. It felt like looking at a photo of 2 dead people. He swiped accept, pressing the phone to his ear. He didn't speak first. Daniel? Her voice was soft, laced with that same raspiness she had come home with. Are you still at the office? It's getting late. Yeah, Daniel said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, flat, mechanical. Just finishing up some structural reviews. There was a fault found in the foundation. Oh no, she said, and he could hear the genuine concern in her tone. That was the worst part. She still cared about him. She could betray him and worry about his work in the same breath. Don't work too hard, honey. I ordered Thai food. It'll be here in 20 minutes. I'm not hungry, he said, cutting her off. There was a pause on the line, a beat of silence where the air grew thin. Are you okay? She asked, her voice shifting, the lawyer's instinct for detecting tonal shifts kicking in. Just a headache, Daniel lied. I'll be home soon. Don't wait up. He ended the call before she could say, I love you. He couldn't hear that lie right now. Not while looking at the date on the ultrasound report Nora had slipped behind the admission form. He stood up and walked to the window. The city was dark now, a grid of amber and white lights. Somewhere out there, in a parking garage on the lower level of Wacker Drive, a meeting was set to happen. Nora had said Julian was checking on his patient. Daniel grabbed his coat. He swept the medical papers into his briefcase and locked it. He wouldn't go home to the Thai food and the wife pretending to be exhausted from work. He had to see the structure of the affair with his own eyes. He had to see them together. He turned off the office lights, plunging the room into darkness, and walked out. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into the underworld. Daniel returned to the apartment an hour later. He hadn't gone to the garage to intervene. He had gone to witness. And he had seen enough. He had seen the black Audi in the shadows of level 4. The way Dr. Julian Cross leaned in through the driver's window to touch Elena's hand, not with sexual heat, but with a somber, conspiratorial intimacy. It was the touch of shared tragedy. Daniel had watched from his own car, invisible, until they parted ways. Then he had driven home in a fugue state, his heart pounding a cold, slow rhythm against his ribs. Now, inside the penthouse, the air was thick with the scent of lemongrass and basil. Elena was sitting at the dining table, picking at a container of pad thai. She had changed into silk pajamas, looking small and defenseless. "You're back," she said, offering a weak smile. "I saved you the spring rolls." Daniel loosened his tie, the fabric feeling like a noose, and sat opposite her. He didn't plate the food. He just stared at the takeout box, then at her. "How are you feeling?" he asked. The question was a landmine. "Better," she lied, taking a small bite of noodles. "Just sore. I think the hotel bed in New York threw my back out. You know how those conference mattresses are?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Right. The hotel. The view of the Hudson." "It was beautiful," she said, her eyes not meeting his. "I wished you were there." "I bet." Daniel leaned back, his fingers drumming silently on the table. "Did you manage to eat anything good while you were there? I know how much you love that Italian place near Times Square." Elena hesitated, a fraction of a second. She took a sip of water. "No, I was too busy with the breakout sessions. Mostly just room service. Club sandwiches, boring salads. I barely left the room." Daniel watched her throat swallow the water. He knew that on Saturday, according to the chart Nora gave him, she had been on a liquid diet post-procedure. The club sandwich was a fabrication, a detail added to normalize a weekend of trauma. "That's a shame," Daniel said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I actually checked the weather for you. It looked like it poured rain all weekend in Manhattan." Elena froze, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth. "Did it? I honestly didn't notice. The conference center has no windows. It felt like a bunker." "Strange," Daniel said, "because the invoice I saw for the summit listed the venue as the Glass Atrium at the Marriott." Elena dropped her fork. It clattered against the ceramic plate, a gunshot in the quiet room. She looked up at him, her pupils dilating. "Daniel, what is this? Why are you quizzing me?" "I'm just interested in your life, Elle," he said, using the nickname Julian had used in the texts. He saw her flinch at the sound of it. "I'm just trying to picture where you were. I feel like we've been so distant lately. I just want to know exactly where you were." "I told you," she said, her voice rising, defensive but shaky. "I was working. Why are you acting like this?" "I'm not acting like anything." Daniel reached forward and took a spring roll. He didn't eat it. He just crushed the flaky pastry between his fingers, watching it crumble onto the table. "You look pale, Elena. You look like you've lost blood." "I told you, I'm exhausted." She pushed her chair back, the legs screeching against the hardwood. "I can't do this tonight. My head is splitting. I'm going to bed." "Take some ibuprofen," Daniel suggested cold-heartedly. "Unless the doctor advised against it." Elena stopped in the doorway of the dining room. She turned slowly, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. "What doctor?" "For the headache," Daniel said, his face a mask of innocence. "Or the back pain from the hotel mattress." Elena stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for a crack, a sign that he knew. But Daniel gave her nothing. He was a structural engineer. He knew how to hold a load without buckling. "Good night, Daniel," she whispered, and fled into the darkness of the hallway. Daniel remained at the table. He looked at the crushed spring roll, the cold noodles, and the empty chair opposite him. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the ghosts of the unborn and the dead weight of a marriage that had already ended, even if she didn't know it yet. He looked at his watch. He would give her one night of restless sleep, Tomorrow, the demolition would begin. The morning sun hit the quartz countertop with a brilliance that felt offensive. It was a Tuesday, a day that should have been filled with the mundane rhythms of coffee grinders and briefcase latches. Instead, the apartment was filled with a thick, static silence. Elena was dressed for work, though she looked like a woman walking to the gallows. She wore a high-collared blouse, perhaps to hide the tension in her neck, and her makeup was applied with a heavy hand, concealing the dark circles that had deepened overnight. She stood by the sink, gripping a travel mug, staring out at the skyline she had claimed to miss while in New York. Daniel sat at the island. He was not dressed for work. He was wearing the clothes he had slept in, or rather, sat awake in. On the marble surface in front of him lay the manila envelope, now opened, its contents neatly stacked. "You're not going in today?" Elena asked, her back to him. Her voice was brittle. "No," Daniel said, "and neither are you." Elena turned slowly. She forced a confused frown, a lawyer's practiced mask of inquiry. "Daniel, I have a deposition at 10. I can't just—" "Sit down, Elena." It wasn't a request. The tone was flat, devoid of the warmth she was used to. It was the voice of a man who had checked the calculations and found the structure condemned. Elena hesitated, her eyes darting to the papers on the counter. She walked over slowly, placing her mug down. "What is this? Is this about the credit card bill? Because I can explain the—" Daniel didn't speak. He simply slid the top sheet of paper across the cold stone. It hissed softly as it moved, coming to a stop directly in front of her. It was the admission form. Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Obstetrics and Gynecology. Elena looked down. For a moment, her brain seemed to reject what it was seeing. She blinked, once, twice. Then the blood drained from her face so violently that Daniel thought she might faint. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sound that was half gasp, half sob. "Post-operative recovery," Daniel read aloud, his eyes never leaving her face. "Incomplete miscarriage. Attending, Dr. Julian Cross." Elena gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with terror. "Daniel, New York," Daniel continued, sliding the second sheet across, the text log Nora had given him. "The Hudson River view, the boring lectures. It was all very detailed, but the timestamps on these texts to Julian, they tell a different story. I can't do this to him. That's me, right? I'm him?" "Stop," she whispered, shaking her head. Tears began to spill, ruining the perfect makeup. "Please stop." "Why stop?" Daniel stood up, towering over the ruins of their life. "I'm just reviewing the documentation. You came home sick, Elena. You let me make you tea. You let me worry about your career burnout while you were recovering from a D&C for a child that wasn't mine." "It wasn't like that!" Elena cried out, the dam breaking. "It wasn't! I didn't want this! It was an accident!" "Which part?" Daniel asked, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "The affair? Or the pregnancy?" Elena sobbed, her body shuddering. She reached out a hand toward him, but he stepped back, repulsed. The distance between them was no longer measured in feet, but in irreversible damage. "I was going to end it," she choked out, the words wet and desperate. "I swore I was going to end it. Then this happened. I lost it, Daniel. I lost the baby. I was in so much pain, and I couldn't tell you. I couldn't hurt you like that." "You couldn't hurt me," Daniel laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He tapped the paper with his index finger. You didn't protect me, Elena. You just excluded me. You lived a whole tragedy, a whole life and death with another man, while I sat here like an idiot waiting for my wife to come home from a business trip. I love you, she pleaded, the words sounding hollow in the bright kitchen. Do you? Daniel picked up the report and held it up, the sunlight illuminating the black redacted lines. Because this doesn't look like love. This looks like a pathology report, and the diagnosis is terminal. He dropped the papers back onto the counter. They scattered slightly, messy and chaotic, much like the truth that was now filling the room. Elena sank onto the bar stool, burying her face in her hands, weeping the tears of someone who had been caught, not someone who had confessed. Daniel watched her, feeling a strange, cold void where his heart used to be. The confrontation was over. The truth was out. And now, the silence was no longer heavy with secrets. It was heavy with the wreckage. The silence that followed the revelation was not empty. It was heavy, filled with the debris of 10 years of marriage. Elena had moved from the kitchen stool to the living room sofa, curling into herself in the corner of the sectional, clutching a throw pillow as if it could shield her from the exposure. Daniel stood by the window, his back to her. The city outside was waking up, the distant hum of traffic, the sun climbing higher, but inside, time had stopped. It started 6 months ago, Elena said, her voice muffled by the pillow. She wasn't looking at him. She was speaking to the floor, to the air, to anyone who might absolve her. Just lunch, then drinks after the firm won the chaotic merger. Julian. He listened. He understood the pressure. I understood the pressure, Daniel said, his voice flat. He didn't turn around. I built this entire life around your pressure. I renovated the kitchen so you'd have a place to decompress. I booked the vacations. I listened to you vent about the partners until 2 a.m. It's different, she whispered. He's a surgeon. He deals with life and death. It felt urgent, intense. And the pregnancy? Daniel asked. Was that urgent? Elena sobbed, a fresh wave of tears. It was a mistake, a failure of precautions. When I found out, I was terrified. I knew it would destroy us. That's why I scheduled the procedure. I was trying to fix it, Daniel. I was trying to erase it so I could come back to you. Daniel turned then. He looked at his wife, the woman he had vowed to protect. She looked small, broken, a victim of her own biology. But the sympathy that should have welled up in his chest was absent. In its place was a cold, clinical revulsion. You didn't try to erase it for me, Daniel said, walking slowly toward the sofa. You did it to save your reputation, to save his. I lost a child, Daniel, she cried out, looking up at him with red, swollen eyes. Doesn't that count for anything? I am sitting here bleeding and empty, and you're looking at me like I'm a stranger. I am grieving. The word hung in the air. Grieving. It was the wrong word. Daniel felt a surge of anger so pure it nearly blinded him. He knelt down, not to comfort her, but to be at eye level. You are grieving his child, Daniel said, the words precise and cutting. You are grieving a future you briefly imagined with him. Don't bring that grief into this house and ask me to share the weight of it. That pain belongs to you and Julian. It has nothing to do with me. Elena flinched as if he had struck her. How can you be so cruel? I'm your wife. Are you? Daniel stood up, needing distance again. My wife was in New York. My wife was tired from a legal summit. The woman sitting here, the woman who lay in a hospital bed holding another man's hand while losing his baby. I don't know her. I wanted to come home, Chitang wept, her defenses crumbling. I just wanted to come home and forget it ever happened. I wanted to with you. But you can't forget, Daniel said, because it's not just a memory. It's medical. It's physical. You carry the scars of another man's child in your body, Elena. Every time I look at you now, I won't see my wife. I'll see the recovery room. I'll see the secrets you kept in your own blood. He walked over to the coffee table where the file still lay. He picked up the text log, the digital footprint of their intimacy. You told him you couldn't do this to me, Daniel said, reading the line again. But you did. You made me an observer in my own marriage. You made me the safety net while you walked the tightrope with him. I'll quit the firm, Elena offered desperately, clutching his hand as he passed. I'll cut him off. We can move. We can start over. Please, Daniel, don't throw away 10 years for 6 months of stupidity. Daniel looked down at her hand on his arm. Her fingers were pale, the diamond ring he had given her catching the light. It looked like a costume prop now. It's not the 6 months, Daniel said softly, pulling his arm away. It's the 3 days. The 3 days you lay in that hospital bed, letting me believe you were working. Letting me send you encouraging texts. Letting me be a fool while you and he mourned together. You didn't just cheat on me sexually, Elena. You excluded me from your reality. He walked to the hallway closet and pulled out his suitcase, the one he used for site visits. Where are you going? Elena panic rose, her voice shrill. I don't know, Daniel said, but I can't stay here. The air in here, it smells like iodine. He didn't look back as he walked to the bedroom to pack. He left her on the sofa, clutching the pillow, surrounded by the expensive silence of the life they had built, which was now nothing more than a beautiful, hollow shell. The master bedroom felt like a museum exhibit of a happy life. The bed was made with military precision, a habit of Daniel's. On the nightstand, a framed photo of them in Tuscany sat next to a stack of unread books. Daniel opened his suitcase on the duvet, the zipper hissing like a warning in the quiet room. He didn't pack everything. He wasn't stripping the house. He was extracting himself. He took his work shirts, the gray suits, the drafting pens he kept in the top drawer. He left the watch she had given him for their 5th anniversary. It lay on the dresser, its face reflecting the ceiling fan, ticking away seconds that no longer mattered to them. Elena stood in the doorway. She had stopped crying. Now she just looked hollowed out, a shell of the vibrant attorney who commanded boardrooms. She leaned her forehead against the doorframe, watching him fold a blue Oxford shirt. You don't have to go tonight, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. You can sleep in the guest room. Please, Daniel. Just don't leave the apartment. Daniel paused, holding the shirt. If I stay tonight, Elena, I'll stay forever. And we will spend the next 20 years pretending this scar isn't here. We'll become polite strangers who share a mortgage. I can't do that. We can fix it, she said, though the conviction was gone. People survive affairs. We have history. We have history, Daniel agreed, placing the shirt in the bag. But we don't have a present. And we certainly don't have a future. He zipped the bag shut. The sound seemed to suck the remaining air out of the room. He lifted it off the bed, the weight of it familiar in his hand. He walked past her. She didn't reach out this time. She knew, perhaps better than he did, that the statute of limitations on this betrayal had run out the moment he saw that medical report. In the foyer, the lights were dimmed. The penthouse view of Chicago was spectacular, a glittering grid of ambition and secrets. Daniel put his hand on the doorknob, the metal cool against his palm. "Daniel," she called out from the hallway. She hadn't moved. "I really was sick. Even if it was because of the pregnancy. I was sick with guilt. Every day." Daniel looked at her one last time. He saw the woman he had loved, but he also saw the stranger who had parked in a garage on Wacker Drive at 3 a.m. to meet another man. He saw the patient in the recovery room. He saw the lie. "I know," Daniel said softly, "but the problem with that kind of sickness, Elena, is that it's contagious, and I'm not going to let it kill me too." He opened the door. The hallway outside was empty, a long stretch of carpet and silence. "Goodbye, Elle," he said. He stepped out and pulled the door closed. The latch clicked, a solid mechanical sound. It was the sound of a structure finally settling after a long, slow collapse. Daniel walked to the elevator. He pressed the button and waited. When the doors slid open, he stepped into the mirrored box and watched the numbers count down. 40, 30, 20. When the doors opened to the lobby, the doorman, who knew him by name, nodded. "Good evening, Mr. Vance. Working late?" "No," Daniel said, walking past him into the cool, biting wind of the Chicago night. "I'm checking out." He didn't look back at the building. He walked toward the street, hailed a cab, and for the first time in days, the air in his lungs didn't taste like iodine. It tasted cold, harsh, and clean.